The summer's almost here. I know because I hear about it every single day. I mean, first there is the kid that's telling me, hey, there's 10 more days until school's out. And then there's my favorite. Not my favorite kid, just my favorite comment, the teenager. Well, I have three teenagers of the seven kids involved in my life, but this particular teenager is 13, going on 14, going on 40. And you parents know what I mean. But she is, as of today, 6 days for her birthday. So I know because her birthday's in June. Yes. So the summer is coming. School is almost out. And man, I admire these kids because I watch them every day. I mean, being a teenager is rough. Now, this being said by an old guy, but I watch teenagers a lot because I live with them, man. And and when you ask them, I mean, have you ever talked to a teenager like, what did you do today? Nothing. What did you learn today? Stuff. So, but when I do get to talk to them, it's so interesting because it's challenging to be a teenager. So they come over sometimes and they have friends over at the house here and I'm watching and when they leave, I'm like, so what do your friends say? Am I the cool dad? you know, Not that I'm out to be the cool dad, but it's just always interesting to find out, right? And they're like, well, they love you. And I'm like, but why? I mean, they said, well, first of all, they've never met anybody who's blind. I said, never? Nobody? I mean, you don't have any disabled students in your school? Well, I don't know. Of course, the usual teenage answer. I don't know. But, you know, they like you. They love you. I'm like, well, why? Well, because they can ask me questions about you. And how does he do this? And how does he do that? And how does he make burgers on the grill? And, how does he use his iPhone and all this different stuff? I'm like, well, why don't they ask me? I'm like, well, they're embarrassed. Besides, I'm an adult. They don't want to talk to me. But it's great that they can talk to one another. And if you are a teenager who who has access to other teenagers or other folks with disabilities, I want you to make it a point to talk with them, talk to them. See, we live in a society right now that is so careful about everything we say. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to ask questions. We're afraid to ask, hey, how do you do that? You know, I was doing a job interview years ago, and the guy sat there and talked to me for, oh, it must have been an hour or so, asked me about my wife and my kids and how I did this and how I did that. And just about asked me how I got dressed in the morning. And at the end, he said, well, I don't think you can do this job. And I said, well, is that fair? Is it fair for you as a person who has not walked in my shoes, who's not been visually impaired or blind? Is it fair for you to judge my abilities based on what would happen to you and what you would do if you had my visual impairment? And I would submit to you, no, but it's not his fault. See, I have set out in my life to separate the stupid from the ignorant. And stupid, well, we all know stupid, but ignorance is really not knowing. And what we've been taught by society is to empathize. And I can empathize with somebody when they've been sad. I can empathize with somebody when they're happy, or when someone has lost a loved one. I mean, that's happened to all of us. But if I met someone, for example, in a wheelchair with certain physical disabilities, I don't know what would happen. I know if that happened to me in my particular situation, I mean, I can't see stuff. So if I was in a wheelchair, man, I'd be done for, right? I'd be in serious trouble according to me, but that's not them. So what I've learned is to give people permission not to empathize, because empathy is only when you can share an experience. But to truly ask questions, now that takes two things. It takes some serious patience on the person having the questions asked, because the questions, they're questions you get every day sometimes. How do you do that? How do you do that? How do you do this? How do you do that? But you know what? If we don't talk, then we don't know. And if we don't converse, people are never going to know. So we need to be, as folks with a disability, we need to be patient with those that have possibly never met a person, for example, in my case, that is blind. That's a dad that runs a company, that does speaking like this, that goes all over the place on planes and trains and automobiles and all that kind of stuff. I don't drive anymore. Well, I never really did drive, but that's a whole different story. But really, I mean, people ask all kinds of questions, and I may ask the same question or answer the same question to 10 different people in the same day, especially if I'm doing a speaking engagement or whatever, and I get asked the same. And it's my job to be patient, but it's also their job to have the nerve to stand up and say, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you do this? And how do you do that? The only stupid question is the one you don't ask. So don't, next time you run into a person with a disability, whether it be in school, or whether it be a teacher, or whether it be another parent or whatever, even if it's a kid with a disabled parent, like my kids, don't be afraid to ask. And those of you that are watching this, that are teenagers or that are folks with disabilities, you know, when I grew up, as a teenager, it was a long time ago, we didn't have the internet. It was pre-internet, and I didn't get to meet a lot of blind folks. But if you have a disability, this one thing right here, this internet, has provided such an opportunity for this thing called mentorship. Mentorship is where the old guys like me talk to the young people like you and say, hey, this is how you do this thing. This is how we navigate this world as blind people, or as people with a physical impairment, or as people that are on the spectrum, or whatever it is. This is how we navigate this world. And you know what? That's called mentorship. And unfortunately, in my life, I'm a pretty ornery, kind of hardcore dude when it comes to doing things my way, you know? And unfortunately, that got me into trouble when I was a kid in many ways, because I didn't have mentorship. I didn't have people who could come alongside and say, hey, you know, let's do it this way. Now, there's a couple of reasons. And one of those reasons is because, like many children in the United States, I am a child of immigrants. I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in Miami. My parents came from Cuba in the 1960s, and they didn't know any English. And they didn't understand the possibilities that a person with a disability has in this great country. They didn't understand because they came from a country where blind people basically collected pennies, you know, and played the guitar and did all kinds of things, pretty much one step above begging. Or if not, if they were really lucky, their family members would take care of them for the rest of their lives, and they would be a burden. So my parents didn't want me to be a burden on society or anybody else, and they were busy working. So they had very little time to be involved in my day to day. As I know as a parent, and those of you that are involved with parents, that's a difficult choice, man, when it's between the light bill, the groceries, and really sitting down and spending some time with your kid doing that homework. I can totally empathize with that. I have other challenges doing homework with my kids, having to do with accessibility and things of that nature for documents, but we'll get into that at another time. But the main thing is, as a parent, as a child of immigrants, it is so difficult when there's a language barrier, when there is a knowledge or a lack of knowledge socially from your ethnicity about the capabilities of a person with a disability. This is why mentorship, why networking, while reaching out, why teachers in school, God bless you. It's so important that teachers reach out to students with disabilities and their families and ask that question. What can I do? Don't just assume. I hate it. I walk down the street sometimes and I'll be like walking down the street and get ready to cross the street, and someone will run up and grab me by their stuff. There's a car coming. Now, wait a second. I didn't just drop out of the sky. I know. Please don't grab my arm. I might bite you, or my god dog might bite you. But hey, that's just the reaction of people. I didn't, so ask when you run into a person with a disability, or in my case, they run into you, uh, ask them, ask them. I mean, there's so many different ways of doing that. It's just simply say, hey, I see that, if you're walking up to a blind person, you know, I see that you have a cane. Do you need someone to direct you? Do you need me to direct you? Are you looking for anything? Can I help? No, thanks. I'm good. Okay, have a great day. Now, before we move forward, I just want you to know that Cuba, the situation in Cuba when it comes to blind folks has changed drastically. They have great programs there now. Don't agree with many politics over there, but I have spent a significant time in Cuba studying the way that blind folks work there. And and I say this not to push so much of that agenda, but just to say that, boy, education, information, really real collaboration, and asking what is necessary has really changed the face of an entire society towards a certain group of people. All the other problems that prevail in that country, of course they prevail. And that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is the way that that country has dealt with its folks with disabilities, in particular, those of us who are visually impaired. One of the greatest resources given to us is the internet. And I got a piece of advice for you. Use it. And you know what? You don't even need to leave TikTok. You don't need to leave YouTube. You don't need to leave Facebook, because I happen to have a few friends and I know that they are online and they create all kinds of cool videos about how blind people do this and how blind people do that and how blind people cook. If you look me up, you can do hashtag BBQing blind, and you can see me in my crazy grilling antics. There's a bunch of other blind folks that you can learn. See, how many blind people are you really going to meet in a lifetime? How many blind people have you met up to now? And that's okay. When you run into a person with any disability, don't feel afraid. Don't be concerned to ask the wrong question. I'll tell you, awkward, well, there are awkward questions and awkward situations. To ask me how I do something is not awkward. But when you're awkward about asking it, well, then that makes me awkward about answering it, because I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want you, if somebody asked me, did you hear that movie on television last night? I don't want to come back and say, well, it's okay to tell me, did you see it? I mean, you don't have to learn a whole new language just to talk to me. But at the same time, I might hurt their feelings because they were trying to relate. So just come out and say, hey, man, did you see the movie on television last night? By the way, how does a blind person see a movie, right? Right now, if you go and you open your Netflix, or if you open Disney Channel, or if you open any of those apps on your phone, there is a section in there called audio description or audio described content. And there's a friendly voice of a sighted person that you can listen to, that when you are sitting there watching your favorite video or movie with your blind friend or family member or significant other, and they're poking you in the ribs going, hey, what's going on? What's going on? In the quiet parts, you don't have to say what you're going to say and describe it, and the other people in the movie theater or whatever say, shut up. No, now there's a little thing that we can watch, and it'll speak to us and explain what that is, and how that and what's going on in the scene. A woman is walking into a room, and she's dressed like this or whatever. So that's very cool. All of this information is available on social media. It really is important that we learn and we use social media. Now, when I was a kid, and when all of us were kids, really, but there was this thing called peer pressure. And social media is the place of peer pressure, especially even for folks who are blind people. Do I look right? Do I look like I'm okay? Do I make sense? Am I dressed right or whatever? And the reality is that, we can learn from each other. Again, mentoring, but don't fall under peer pressure. Bullying online is such a huge thing. And for those of us that are online with disabilities, hurt people hurt other people. And there are many hurt people out there. And many of them sit behind this keyboard and say very hurtful things or very stupid things, and don't allow that to get you down, man. Don't listen to that kind of stuff, because you're so much bigger than that. You're so much bigger than, even what those people that don't know what you've done, and they don't know what you can do, and they just look at you and they just make a statement. Oh, you can only do this, or only you can do that. You know what? You can do anything you set your heart out to do. I grew up at a time where they used to tell me, hey, you need to be normal. And I never understood, and still don't understand to this day, what does normal mean, people? Because I am certainly not normal. And not because I'm blind. I'm just not normal. And if you think I'm normal, bless your heart. You don't know me well enough yet. But the truth of the matter is that we don't know what normal is. I don't know anybody who knows what normal is. But if you have something burning a hole in your heart, if you want to do something, you know what? When I had a little boy, well, I have a little boy, I have big older men now, but when they were little boys, one of them wanted to be a teacher, a fireman, and a police officer, all at the same time. And by the way, he wanted to be a superhero too. And what did I tell him? Oh, no, son, you need to be normal. You need to learn to, balance yourself. And no, dude, you can be whatever you want to be. You can be whoever you want to be. You know what? If you can dream it, you can do it. So dream it, do it, and go out there and be a superstar, because you deserve to be. Thank you very much.